Okay, so the Devil May Cry series has been around for over 2 decades now. The original game came out back in 2001, and since then, people have had nothing but good things to say about the Devil May Cry series in general, especially the latest game or the latest main entry in the series, Devil May Cry 5, which came out back in 2019, which I believe may have ended up becoming the best selling Devil May Cry game of all time. And I think it's going to be a while before we get Devil May Cry 7 in the future. But as far as like some of the older titles is concerned, a lot of people have been voicing their opinions on different forums like Reddit on whether or not Capcom should remake Devil May Cry 2 or Devil May Cry 3 for that matter. And the thing is, even though we got the Devil May Cry HD collection like back in it was about a decade ago, I believe, like in 2012 or something. Even though we got that, all those games were remastered. The first three Devil May Cry games were remastered. They didn't necessarily get remakes or anything like that. But the thing is, it was probably too soon because, now it's like we're like a long time or a long ways removed from when those games came out. You know what I mean? And the thing is, Devil May Cry, the series was really hot back in the 2000s, and in the teens it wasn't quite as big. But then we got Devil May Cry 5, and people are talking about it, and it's almost as popular as it was back in the 2000s. And I honestly feel like a potential remake of Devil May Cry 3 would definitely turn heads, especially if it's done the right way this time. Because you look at the original Devil May Cry 3 game that came out back in 2005, even though a lot of people will go on record and say that was probably one of the best entries in the series. That game got a lot of flack for being way more difficult than any business being because for whatever reason, Devil May Cry 3 was harder in America than it was in Japan because they took the hard mode in Japan and made it the normal mode in America, similar to what Sega did with Streets of Rage 3 back in like the mid 90s. And I honestly feel like that was unfair to a lot of players, and it's something that I feel in some ways detracted from the overall quality of the game itself. Now, despite what had happened with that, I believe it was still a huge commercial success. It reached over like 2.3 million copies in terms of sales, and a lot of people, for the most part, will go on record and tell you that was definitely better than Devil May Cry 4, which, I mean, that's a game that's underrated in of itself, but at the same time, it's not quite as good as the first game or the second or the third game. But but as far as Devil May Cry in general is concerned, um, obviously the series is still an attraction. I'm pretty sure there are hardcore fans and casuals who would love to see a remake of Devil May Cry 3 in the future, mainly because it's an opportunity for Capcom to kind of sort out difficulty issues with the game, make it more playable for like casuals, and for the most part kind of introduced casuals to that story between Dante and his brother, and that's something that I feel like made for like good storytelling. It was one of the better storylines in the entire Devil May Cry franchise. And honestly, like in 2025, I think it's going to mark the 20-year anniversary of Devil May Cry 3. And the thing is, like, you look at this year, 2023, I believe this year marks the 20-year anniversary of Devil May Cry 2, which came out back in 2003. And I'm shocked that we didn't get a current generation remake from Capcom regarding this. But obviously, Capcom knows that the Resident Evil series is a bigger attraction and sells more. And obviously, they've had their hands full with Resident Evil. And honestly, this game right here, Devil May Cry 3, I think one of the reasons why it may have gotten overshadowed back in 2005 was because it came out the same year that Resident Evil 4 was released. And honestly, that is probably one of the best entries in the entire Resident Evil series, probably next to Resident Evil 2. So, unfortunately, Devil May Cry 3 didn't sell as much as it could, but at the same time, I do feel like a potential remake later down the line, probably during its 20th anniversary, is something that would definitely turn heads within the gaming world.